All right, guys. Our next guest is a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt. He runs the Straight Blast Gym in Ireland, and he trains fighters such as Gunnar Daly, Cathal Pendred, and of course Conor McGregor. He is none other than John Kavanagh. John, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
It's an honor to be here, and it's a great day. So thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. I believe you're the first Irish person we've had on Submission Radio, so it's a big milestone for us too. Now, let's talk about you and how you started. You know, we had a chance to watch a short clip about your life, and it was fascinating seeing where you began compared to where you are now. Let's start at the beginning. You mentioned you started coaching from age 18. What drove you to be a coach at such a young age?
I was actually even younger than that. When I was doing karate, when I was about 14, my instructor then started having me take some of the classes. I always enjoyed teaching. It's been a fascination of mine my whole life. I actually figured that if this didn't work out, I was going to be a school teacher. I was going to be a math teacher. So it's just always been a pleasure of mine that you get to show somebody something they didn't know before, and you get that kind of aha moment. Their eyes widen a bit, and it's especially when you get to teach something as fun as martial arts, and maybe they're stuck in a position they've no way out, and then you show it to them, and it almost appears like you're teaching them magic. So it's a very rewarding career, and yeah, I've just since I've been involved in martial arts, I've been involved in the teaching side of it, and it's a lot of fun for me.
Interesting, and almost went down the road of Rich Franklin being a maths teacher. So very interesting.
Yeah,
not
yeah. When I was in university, I did a degree in engineering and maths, and even when I was graduating, I had in my head I didn't particularly want to work in the field, but I had sort of had in my head maybe I could go back and become a maths teacher in university, and then a few years later I heard Rich Franklin was a maths teacher. I thought that was quite a funny coincidence, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can run an MMA seminar / maths class together one day. It'll draw a lot of numbers. Fun. Now, while we were researching you, we saw that you moved around to a lot of different gyms. You had a lot of different gyms. One of them you referred to as the garage. It was a bit of a smaller space. It was one of your first schools. Tell us, what was the MMA landscape like in Ireland during that time? What was it like?
Yeah, a bit of a smaller space. That's one way of putting it. It was about 40 square meters. The roof fell in on us one day. Wow. We had to go to the toilet in a laneway outside. It was freezing cold. It was pretty miserable. But it was my first full time in big inverted commas gym from when I graduated from college, and it was all I could afford. It was me and about 20 guys. I guess the landscape in Ireland was there was maybe 2 or 3 other clubs in the whole country. I think on last count we have just under 90 clubs now in Ireland.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure I'm in the biggest facility in the country, but there's a few other ones that are big full-time gyms as well. So it's been I guess it's 12, 13 years now since then. It has grown somewhat gradually, but definitely in the last 4 years, 5 years, there's been a massive spurt, a massive growth.
Yeah, and it seems to be the trend pretty much with MMA and in general, martial arts, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu all over the world. Now, we read on your bio that you are Ireland's first and currently only black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Is that still accurate, and how did you bring the sport down to Ireland?
Well, you've just given me some info there that I need to go and change that, because although I was first, I believe now there's probably more than 10 black belts, more than 10 Irish black belts. So I'm going to have to go onto my webmaster to change that. It's not something that I read all that often, so I wasn't aware it still said that. But I was the first one, which is, I guess, one of those things. Historically, it's nice to be the first to do something.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of very solid, really good competitive black belts in jiu-jitsu. Much more accomplished than I ever was in the competitive aspect of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So yeah, the BJJ, the pure BJJ scene here is flourishing. A lot of guys bringing it a lot further than I had. My goal, or not my goal, my passion was always for grappling in MMA. I was always fascinated how Brazilian jiu-jitsu could be used in mixed martial arts fights, and that's the area that I kind of got lost in, fell into, and enjoyed developing, and that's what I enjoy coaching.
Yeah, and obviously there's a tremendous honor with being the first black belt in Ireland, or if you're the first black belt in any country, it's a great honor. But it also means that you got into the sport of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu before really anyone. I mean, I can't imagine you would have had too many people going, "Oh, come down to the club with us." Everyone's doing, and there's all these black belts. What was that like? How did you get into it? And also, how did you bring the sport down to Ireland?
I mean, I told the story a few times, but very briefly, I saw UFC 1 on a Friday night. I just happened to get a hold of it. I just thought this was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anything like this. I figured that if two guys are fighting, it was punching and kicking. And then all of a sudden, everybody knows the story. We see this kind of skinny Brazilian taking people down and finishing them on the ground. Not a clue what was going on. That was Friday night. On Saturday mornings, I used to get a group of guys together and we do some kickboxing and fitness training. Well, that Saturday instead, we lay on the ground and tried to headlock each other. And that, from those very humble beginnings, that's where it all began. And it was just a case of trying to figure out moves and pause and rewind an old VHS tape and see what Heist Gracie was doing. Travel around. I was lucky early on to meet a very accomplished judo player in Ireland, Andy Ryan, who's now is also a BJJ black belt. Just kind of exchanging ideas, and a lot of techniques in judo are the same as BJJ anyway. It's basically control and grappling on the ground. So it was a sort of a slower process. Like now, I'm a little bit envious of guys when they walk in. They have a bunch of brown and black belts coaching them from day one, and probably they're at a level in 6 months what took me 4 years to get to. But that's how it is when you're the first to do something. But I'm glad I went down the road I did as well. I'm kind of glad I had to kind of self-learn it and figure out as I went along, because there's something somewhat rewarding that if you have a puzzle and you're trying to solve it for weeks, possibly even months, and then suddenly the answer presents itself. It's a very rewarding, very rewarding thing to do. So yeah, it was a slower process, but I'm glad I did it.
Wow, VHS tapes. I don't think grapplers these days really know how lucky they are with YouTube and all the great DVDs out there. I mean, it's a really different landscape. But you touched on MMA in Ireland before. You mentioned there's like 90 clubs there now. We hear a lot of stories, but being in Australia, we haven't had a chance to speak to someone who's actually been a part of the current boom over there. Tell us, what do you attribute to the huge growth of the sport in your country? And how big is it in Ireland right now? What's it like on the streets? Is everybody into it? Is it one of the main sports in the country?
I would think at this stage it is, yeah. Even yesterday I was grocery shopping, and I asked one of the people there working, where's the onions? And they were like, "Oh, let me show you, John. It's over here." And I was like, "Okay," he knows my name. And giving me them and saying, "Hey, best luck to you and Conor in Boston." So it still catches me by surprise, and I could be walking down the road and there's people driving by beeping the horn and good luck in Boston, shouting out the window. And so it definitely seems to be known by pretty much everybody. And certainly if you're walking down the road with Conor, you better be prepared to know how to use a camera phone on everybody's phone, because they're going to be stopped and you're the photographer if you're with him. So it's in the last year and a half, 2 years, it's gone from being maybe somewhat of a niche sport to being shown on our main TV channels here and getting mentions in the national news. So it's for me, it's when I remember a couple of years ago, if you saw someone wearing a tap-out shirt walking down the street, you probably knew who it was, because there were so few people involved in the sport. And now there's guys walking down the street wearing UFC clothing and these other brands that are just fans. They're not even in a club. Maybe they just like watching it and like being part of it.
Yeah,
I imagine it's somewhat similar to Australia. Like it went from, I was a big fan of Elvis Sinovich back in the day, and I'm sure he kind of went through the same thing that Conor did. Like, he was probably the guy that introduced the sport to a lot of people and got a lot of people interested in it. And like the Aussies, I think we Irish people, we like competition and we like fighting,
Yeah.
And so it's no mystery that it was going to take off and be big here. And unlike other sports, I think other sports are popular because they're popular almost by accident. Like, their dad showed them. Like, no one in Australia, well, I'm guessing, really cares about baseball I know in Ireland we don't care about baseball, whereas, you know, that's huge in America and other parts of the world. And maybe over in America, nobody cares about rugby or about Aussie rules or about soccer, but it's, you know, it's big in the countries where it is. But no matter where you go, fighting is important. And the fact that UFC are able to take a sport that is globally important and interesting and then spend a couple of billion making it, you know, making it a slick product and good marketing. It's no wonder that it's gotten this big.
Yeah, no, that's a very good theory and absolutely true. You know, you mentioned Conor McGregor. I would say he's definitely a big part of the boom in MMA in Ireland. You know, tell us, when did you first start working with Conor, and what were your first impressions of him when he first came to the gym?
He's been with me now since he's 16 or 17. He's 27 now, so he's about 10 years, I guess, we're together. Yeah, I'm often asked that, and I'd like to be able to tell a cool story that he walked in and the ceiling split and thunder came and there was a lightning bolt and stuff. But really, he was just another kid walking into the gym. He didn't really think anything different than anybody else. Pretty quickly, it became obvious that he wanted to compete, so he was training a lot, and he's always been sort of loud and brash and funny and arrogant, and I was kind of always drawn to him. I just thought he was a funny kid. But yeah, at the beginning, like anybody else, he had decent striking. He'd come from boxing, but his grappling was, you know, he was obviously just learning that aspect of mixed martial arts. So just like anybody else, we just struck up a relationship, and it's grown steadily over the years. And obviously now 10 years on, we're tight, and we've been through a lot together. So lately a lot of ups, but there was a lot of downs during that period as well, and we were able to get through it. And now here we are. It's a nice success story.
Sorry to cut in there, Dennis. I was just going to say, when you say there have been a lot of downs, what sort of downs were you talking about?
Oh, you know, we're 10 years at it. The last year and a half, there's been money involved, but the first 8.5, there was none. You know, he's basically on the breadline, and I'm trying to help him with that. And you know, there's times where you're paying for meals, and you're bringing them away to do a fight in the UK. You know, we're having to hustle and scrape together pennies so that we can afford to be there, and you know, your basic living costs. This is, I'm guessing it's the same in Australia. There's no government funding to help a young athlete that wants to fight professionally. If Conor had been a soccer player at Air Sport GAA, he would have got some funding from the government, but for his sport there was none. So it's, you know, you're on that. You're barely able to get by, and you're doing all this hard training, and we're in these cold, miserable facilities, and you know, there's a bit of work involved in trying to keep someone motivated during those long winter nights to get down to the gym and put in another hard round, even though there's no solid goal at the end. It's somewhat different from someone now. They can look to Conor and say, yeah, there is a career path here, but when he was starting off, there was no one to look to, and we didn't know if it was going to work out. I wasn't able to promise him anything. Hey, keep at it, and maybe you'll get there. Even when he started, the UFC was still quite small then. You know, you're talking back before in UFC 80s. You know, no one was making big money back then, but we all kept our head down, and we all kept doing it because our goal was, and our passion was, the sport. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't to get famous. It was to get better at fighting, to get better at martial arts, and luckily coinciding with that, the sport blew up during that decade. And yeah, like I said, here we are now. It's that investment has paid off.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy, John. Do you guys ever sort of reminisce back to those days, you know, and look at what you are now, and just, you know, obviously think, wow, look how far we've come, and, you know, look at all the stuff that we've been through together, you know, to get to this point and we're actually here. Do you guys ever sort of just sit around and do that?
You know, like last night, actually, we went out for dinner. Conor's last red meat meal last night. He stops taking red meat about this far out from the weigh-in. So we went out somewhere nice in Dublin and had a nice steak, and we're there with girlfriends. And it was nice to be able to, during downtime like that, just kind of reflect. You know, here we are again. We're getting ready to travel to Boston to headline another card that's getting a huge amount of attention, and we're remembering the times where he's out in his car park and me and him are trying to push his girlfriend's car to get it started because his old Peugeot 206 had crashed again and wouldn't start. And, you know, you're just kind of laughing at those times. And, Even times where I'm chasing Conor for his mat fees, and he was always the first on the map, but then when it came to paying for the session, he was the first out the door as well. So it's, it's all a bit of a giggle now, but yeah, it's a bit of fun during downtime like that to reflect. But certainly, we're in the gym. We're only ever worried about the present. What are we trying to accomplish with today's session, and to make today's session as profitable and as productive as possible.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show Entourage, but your story reminds me a lot of Entourage. Now,
I actually really enjoyed Entourage. I watched the first 1 or 2 seasons, then I kind of went off, but I thought it was a great show.
Yeah, man, it's our favorite. Now, speaking of Conor, we've only been able to see very little of what Conor is capable of doing in the octagon, and thus far it's been really impressive. However, the biggest criticism from MMA fans is that the UFC picking winnable fights for him, and that if he went up against a guy like, say, Chad Mendes or Dennis Bermudez or Franki Edgar of the division, he would lose because of their wrestling. As Conor's coach, can you tell us how good is his grappling, and how would he do against the quote-unquote wrestlers in the division?
Well, the great thing is that we're going to see that. There's for sure he's going to be facing all these guys as time progresses, and I've no doubt the result will be the same. But of course, I'm going to say that, and Conor's going to say it, and then the fans will have their opinion, and that's great. It creates drama, it creates interest in the sport. But to think that we're not working on those aspects, and when the fans see the likes of Cathal Pendred and the grappling pressure he can bring to a fight. When you see Gunnar and how slick he is on the ground, and the fact that Conor's with them every day on the mat, I would ask them to just apply a little bit of logic to it and think, well, what do you think we're doing every day? Of course we're preparing for all types of opponent, but like I said, if you look at someone like a great champion like John Jones, he's faced every style of fighter, and he tends to not only beat them, but he tends to beat them within their own style, and yet, as soon as the fight's over, people are thinking, well, he's not that good, and what if he faces this guy? What if he faces that guy? And that's great. That's what entertainment is supposed to be about. It would actually be worse if everybody just said, oh, well, I guess he's unbeatable. I don't want to see him anymore. So I'm glad that there's questions, and I look forward to answering them over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just speaking in terms of, like, wrestling and the actual, I guess, mechanics behind it, we read an article a while back where it noted that fighters such as Conor McGregor are defending takedowns by cutting angles rather than using the traditional sprawl. Kind of like if you can get out of the way of a punch, similarly, you can get out of the way of a takedown. Would you agree that this is something, somewhat the next evolution of MMA and what's happening?
A little bit. I do think it's even more down to the fact that there's striking involved. Let's use Aldo as an example. He's continuously showed how good he is against if you want to say the grappler, and it's because the striking is so effective that he gets people shooting from the other side of the octagon. Whereas if you look at, say, traditional freestyle wrestling, they tend to be in a tie-up, and then the athletes will do something to clear the arms and then shoot in. In other words, they're shooting from less than a meter. But in MMA, they're trying to shoot from 3 meters out because they're so nervous of the strikes. So I think that's what's made a big difference to the wrestler, is that they have to be able to get into a range where they're nose to nose with somebody and then shoot. And then it's like a freestyle wrestling match. But if you have such good kicks and such good punches that you have someone shooting from the outside of kicking range, it's a lot easier to deal with the shot, and it's a lot easier to deal with, to sprawl on them than it is if they're already got hands on you and they're in an environment that they're more comfortable with that kind of high school wrestling, freestyle wrestling, Olympic wrestling range. You'll never see a freestyle wrestler shooting in a wrestling match from outside kicking range. He's always in where he's hand fighting. He's at that range. It's close. But if you're very nervous of striking, your wrestling is pretty much useless because you have to shoot from the outside.
Yeah, unless you're fighting James Toney, that's not going to work. Now, let's discuss this upcoming fight with veteran Dennis Siver. And actually, just a little funny story for all the listeners. When we first called up and Casper said, my co-host Dennis is on the line, he said, not Dennis Siver, is Dennis Siver on the line? We all had a bit of a laugh about that. And I almost wanted to put on a Dennis Siver accent for you just to play along with the joke.
999.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he's a part Russian and he's a part German, and there's a part of Russian in me, so I thought I'd get onto you with that. But
You give it a go.
give it a go. But seriously speaking about it, Conor has said that he plans on beating Dennis in 2 minutes. Do you believe that prediction is accurate? Do you think that fight is going to be that easy for Conor?
But being honest, no. I think it'll be under a minute.
Wow. What makes you say that? I'm assuming you guys have studied tape, whipped out the old VHSs and looked at Dennis's style. What makes you say that?
I just think he has. I don't think he has a great skill set for Conor, because he's a short kickboxer. He tends to rely on his striking a lot. And to try to fight Conor in the kickboxing range, where you're giving up a half a meter of range, is very, very difficult to do. If you look at the Poirier fight with Conor, after the first one or two exchanges, Poirier was in survival mode. He was backing off, just trying to get through the first round, and it's because, and it's no secret, I've said it in all my interviews, when people get hit by Conor the first time, it's very different, and you can talk about it and you can try and prepare in the gym for it, but I see it in them in every fight, and you can watch it yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. When that first shot lands, the eyes widen a little bit more, and I know in their head they're going, what the hell have I signed up for? Because they don't spar light heavyweights in their gym, so they're not used to taking a light heavyweight shot. But that's how Conor hits. And I believe Dennis, his better years, I think, are behind him, and he's been in some wars, so he's not able to take the shots maybe he once was able to. And, Swanson, in their fight, he landed some good shots in the third round and had them all over the place. But it's not going to take Conor that long. And he'll connect early, hard, and Siver's not going to be able to take that.
Wow. In terms of Dennis Siver, analyzing his style, where do you think he ranks in terms of, difficulty compared to Conor's past opponents?
Well, he definitely has certain positive attributes. He looks immensely strong. I imagine when people have been in the clinch with him, it's not fun if he wants to try to squeeze you and bull you around. He looks a very powerful man. But like I said, he's got this kind of flicky lead roundhouse kick, and he doesn't really close distance all that well. He's a little bit slow, so he can't really involve his hands. But yeah, if you want to step into the pocket and trade with him, that's going to be dangerous. But that's dangerous with any fighter. Any fighter can land a hard shot and put you down. But I do believe that like Poirier was a little bit more well-rounded and a bit rangier with his shots, so a little bit more difficult to close in on. But Siver, I think he's going to look. All his shots are going to land short. And then when the first couple of shots from Conor land, you'll see him backing off trying to survive. He'll end up with his back on the fence pretty quickly. Conor will get him reacting, freezing, daring himself. He'll make a mistake and he'll go to sleep.
Wow, what a prediction. And, John, it sounds like, just like a lot of the fans, they were a little bit surprised when they found Dennis would be fighting Conor next because he had such an impressive performance against Dustin. Was he a fight that you guys wanted next? Or did you want to fight somebody else in the division rather than Dennis? Was it just something the UFC presented to you guys?
Yeah, I would have loved it to be Aldo, if I'm being honest. But these are the guys that map out what direction they want certain athletes to go in, and this was the next opponent, and then it's Aldo. So whoever it was, it didn't make a difference. He fought Brandao, who was the wild striker that also had world-class jiu-jitsu, and he was going to show Conor what's up, and well, we saw what happened, and then he went in against the number 5 Poirier, who was the first, top 5 American fighter who had been in there with them all and was going to show Conor what's up, and we saw what happened there. And I just can't see what name it would have made a difference. If I had been, if you look at the likes of Swanson and Poirier and Edgar, they've all fought each other, and Swanson and Poirier went the distance, and Swanson and Edgar went the distance, and I put all those guys in a similar. Actually, no, I'm saying that wrong. Didn't Edgar finish Swanson right at the end? I got that right. Well, regardless, they all look like a similar level of opponent. Conor at this stage is not even really playing the same sport, I don't believe.
Wow. Well, obviously you said that you wanted Aldo next. Dana White has said that if Conor beats Dennis Siver, and you're very confident that he will be getting Jose Aldo next. Let's talk game plans. Many have tried. No one else has been able to succeed. Where do you believe Conor's advantages lie over Jose Aldo, and how would you see Conor winning it?
Yeah. I believe Aldo has faced guys who are accomplished grapplers that were learning striking. And he's looked well. He's looked good against those. But he has had that intimidation factor, the big leg kicks and the fast hands, and he kind of gets people on the back foot, and their skill level goes down when they're shooting from the other side of the octagon. But now he's going to fight someone who is going to, I believe, not only match him, but supersede him in the striking area, and he's going to feel what it's like to be on the back foot and what it's like to feel intimidated in that range. And I believe he'll turn Aldo into a grappler pretty quickly, and I can see him being the one trying to take Conor down. And I think that's where that's going to be his first experience of that. It's going to be a major difference in anything he's faced before.
John, a lot of people say a lot of negative things about Jose Aldo, but, he is really one of the best pound-for-pound fighters of all time. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on Aldo as a fighter? What are your and Conor's thoughts about Aldo? Do you believe he is one of the all-time greats in the division? What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I can obviously only answer for myself, but my thoughts on it would be that he's a fantastic fighter. Let's look at the evidence. Am I right in saying he's the only ever UFC featherweight champion?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm not too good at stats, but I believe he is.
He is.
And
yeah.
then if you look at his run in the WEC as well, I mean, that's not by accident. He might win one or two, and people could argue that you've been lucky, but he's beaten everybody. He's beaten literally everybody that's been put in front of him. I do think a little bit he's been facing a similar opponent in a lot of his fights, and they're kind of undersized grapplers that are learning striking. So I'm curious to see how he does against somebody, like I said, who can match him skill-wise and speed-wise and strength-wise in the striking, and let's see how he holds up. But just based on what he's done so far, you'd be nuts to say he wasn't a great fighter and someone that has shown a very high level of skill in all ranges of mixed martial arts. He's from a great team. I was actually a huge fan of his coach when he was fighting back in the Pride days and the shows that he was on under Pendred. So you can do nothing at the moment but bow your head to his fantastic performances to date. Now that's not to say that I don't think Conor will beat him when they meet.
Now, John, we told the fans that you were coming on the show, and they sent in some fan questions. We just got a couple for you. McGregor fan 1 wants to know, if the title fight between Conor and Aldo doesn't happen in a huge stadium show in Ireland, to be honest, that would be hard to imagine, would you be comfortable with Conor fighting Jose in Brazil for the title?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this video that they did when Conor visited Brazil, and they put him on a stage and basically had a couple of thousand people just
the Q&A.
give him abuse. And you can see Conor's reaction. It was smiling, laughing. He thrives in this. Of course, the Dublin show will be fantastic, very historic to do it here in Ireland. But I think a little bit unlike Aldo, rather than be affected by negativity from a crowd, he rises to that occasion and he loves it. So I've no doubt we will do a fight in Brazil at some stage. Brazil is a hotbed for producing great fighters, and they also are a bit like the Irish fans. They're incredibly passionate for their own fighters. So, and that's something we kind of grew up with in here. Like when Conor was kind of coming through the early stages, we were always having to travel to the UK and travel around Europe to find big fights. They weren't in Ireland back then. They were around Europe. And we were always the visiting fighter. We were always the one getting booed and heckled. And, at the end of the day, it's you and one guy plus a referee in a cage, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're having a huge stadium show here in Melbourne in November. I think you guys might have heard about it. Love to have Conor down here, but obviously, I think you guys deserve to have him fight in Ireland first. Now, we've got the last fan question we're going to ask you is from the real McCoy, and I think he's sort of asking this question for down the line, but he's wondering, if Conor is successful in the featherweight division and cleans it out, much like John Jones, could you see him dropping down a bantamweight to challenging guys like TJ Dillashaw for the belt and be a 2-division champion?
100% no. He's going to go up a division, and that's a certainty. He will go up to lightweight. And I people say I'm nuts when I say this, but I could actually see him taking out the welterweight division as well. But right now, the featherweight belt is the goal, and then the lightweight belt, and then we'll see how he's going. But bantamweight, I'd have to saw off at least one of his legs, possibly two.
Now, John, before we let you go, we want to do something with you that we do with all our guests. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. It's world famous. But that would mean it's not world famous, but it is a bunch of fun. We fire off a bunch of fun questions at you, and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, kind of like word association. Are you ready?
Yeah, this makes me nervous, but go ahead.
Then that's all right. Nice and easy. All right. What's the most enjoyable thing about being a coach for all these years?
Seeing people progress and fulfill their dreams.
Now, with this big MMA boom, has Steven Seagal volunteered to come down to the gym and show you or any of your fighters some of his secret techniques yet?
It would be an honor to have him here, but I wouldn't mind having him around with Steven Seagal.
Oh, really? The deadly stuff. Now,
I want to learn the deadly stuff.
Yeah. Give us a couple of your highlights so far in your coaching career, John.
UFC Dublin has to be top of the list. You know, we broke a bunch of records that night, and I kind of say on that night, it was when I went to my parents and I was like, I told you this was going to be something when you were giving out to me 12 years ago for stopping an engineering degree, an engineering profession. I did get my degree, but so that was a nice pinnacle. But there's been so many other instances over the years where, you know, it's just a guy coming in off the street and learning jiu-jitsu for the first time and losing a bit of weight and gaining some confidence. They're not in the headlines. They're not in the media. People don't know about them, but it's those consistent emails I get from people saying that it's made a significant impact on their life and improved the quality of their life. They're actually the ones that make me the happiest.
Wow. And, you know, John, we want you to finish this sentence. People don't know that I...
a Spider-Man comic nerd.
Oh, wow. Not Batman, Spider-Man. Why is this, John? What's going on?
Come on, Spider-Man. Don't even get me started on Marvel versus DC.
You're a martial artist. Batman is a martial artist. Spider-Man has web coming out of his hands.
He learns nonsense martial arts. What are you, like Krav Maga or something like that? I'd give him somewhat respect if he was like an MMA or a jiu-jitsu expert. But Spidey, he uses his senses, and I like how he's not really getting involved in battles. He's using his brain more. And I'm a big spider fan as well. I've collected tarantulas since I was 12 years of age. So I'm a arachnophile, not arachnophobe.
We're more arachnophobes, so there you go. Now, John, do you believe Aisling Daly was underestimated, being picked last, and a bit misunderstood by her coaches on Team Pettis in Tough?
I have to say it's Aisling Daly, like a tree, like an ash.
Oh, Aisling.
So Aisling Daly.
Okay.
It's just the pronunciation in Irish. Well, I thought it was very silly of them. I know she was very honest and upfront about her dealing with depression, and I can only think that that's what put them off. But they obviously don't know her because she's so tough and resilient. And just looking at the numbers, like to pick someone who's 2-1 ahead of someone who's 14-2 or whatever she was at the time is, in my opinion, as a coach, just not all that bright, not all that clever to do. And she had a good run in the house, but the house definitely didn't suit her. She's just not that type of personality. And also, she's a big weight cutter, so to try and make that weight a couple of weeks in a row, it's just impossible for her to do. We had a hiccup in the lead up to the last fight. There was some stuff that happened outside, but I don't like offering excuses, and I know Ash wouldn't appreciate me bringing it up and try to offer an excuse. But, you know, we hold our hands up. She missed it by 2 pounds, but she went in and she had a good performance nonetheless. But I can guarantee you her next fight, she'll hit that championship 115 weight and will look fantastic at it. And that's another, her and Paddy Houlihan, because of the divisions they're in, they're 1 or 2 solid wins away from a title fight as well. So the chase is on at SBG to see who's going to get that belt first.
Absolutely. And even though she beat our very own Australian, we're very excited to see what Daly has to offer in the division. Now,
the two of them are good friends as well. Ash told me a lot of stories about that girl, and she was a big fan of her. And both the girls were not exactly over the moon when the match was announced because they were such close friends in the house. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's the sport. And you know, you go in, you fight hard, and at the end, you buy them a beer.
That's right. I'll put some shrimp on the
bar.
That's
my impression of an Aussie there.
That's it. Now, John, tell us, what's the best advice you've ever received from a coach?
I can give you that easily. The best advice I ever got was from my coach, Matt Thornton, and he said, never ask somebody, do they want to fight? Have them approach you. And that has stood me well for over a decade.
Very good. That's something you can take to the bank.
It seems very simple, but it's very tempting when you're a coach and you see somebody showing some ability on the mat, and you go up and say, hey, you want to fight MMA? You know, there's a fight coming up. Do you want to have a go of it? And right away, you've messed it all up right from day one, because maybe they say yeah now for the wrong reasons. Maybe they want to try to please you. But if you make it difficult for them to get their first fight and they have to chase you for it, well, you know they're mentally in the right place. And then you have the easy side, and that's teaching them how to fight.
It's very smart. Lock, stock, or snatch?
Snatch.
Wow, that's probably the
like
biggest statement you made in the interview.
You know?
You like who, sorry?
I like the character Mickey in it. Someone reminds me of Conor a little bit.
Brad Pitt. Do you like dogs, right?
Yeah. I'm running very fast.
Okay, now, John, what's an underutilized technique in MMA? What's one technique that you believe is underutilized?
That's an interesting question. I think the kicking game is still very undeveloped in general in mixed martial arts. You know, Conor throws a lead leg hook kick, and the interviewers are going crazy. Whereas for me, this is just, you know, would you go crazy if someone was to throw a hook punch? No. So I believe the kicking game in MMA is something that over the last few months has begun to develop in some fighters. I think Conor's one of the best, if not the best, at it at the moment. But I can see that continuing to grow rather than just the low kick, you know, the Thai boxing big round kick and low kick. Well, now we're starting to see the turning kicks and the lead leg hook kicks, and people expanding their vocabulary with their legs.
And finally, John, last question. You basically spoke about it before, but the official prediction. What's your official prediction? How is McGregor beating Siver on January 18th?
I see clean knockout, certainly within the first 2 minutes.
Well, you can't argue with that, guys. Make sure you check out the fight. And, guys, if you're traveling to Ireland, make sure you stop by this mega gym, John's Gym. Go to www.sbgisland.com. Check out where it is and make sure you drop by. And also follow John on Twitter. He puts up a lot of good photos. It looked like he was doing a bit of rolling on New Year's Eve, or just as New Year's was happening. So a lot of respect to John for that. You can follow him at JOH_KAVANAGH. John, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Do you mind if I give a quick shout out before we go?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to give a quick shout out to an Aussie friend of mine, Ben Power. I'd actually accredit him to teaching me most of my jiu-jitsu in the early days. Back when I had only started, he was a solid purple belt, trained with Elvis and those guys, and he was in Ireland for quite a while, and we became very close friends, and he was one of my earliest technical instructors in jiu-jitsu, and put me, I still teach a lot of the techniques he taught me back then over 10 years ago. And just one as well, one of my best friends, Rob Byrne, who's been living in Sydney now for, I think he's there over 7 years now, married over there to Emer. So just a quick hello to those guys, and I hope they're doing well.
Awesome. Well, big shout outs to Ben and Rob. Again, John, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the invite.